I was standing on the curb, luggage in hand, staring at a family of strangers moving into my house. The house my parents secretly sold while I was working abroad just to pay for my sister's $150,000 wedding. So, I let her put on the white dress. Then I sued them all. My name is Evelyn. For the last 2 years, I've been living in London, spearheading a major overseas expansion for the tech firm I work for. It was a grueling, 80-hour-a-week job, but the sacrifice was worth it because I had a sanctuary waiting for me back in Seattle. When I was 26, I poured every dime of my savings, stock options, and a small inheritance from my late grandmother into buying a beautiful, 3-bedroom craftsman home in Ballard. It was my pride and joy. I had restored the original hardwood floors myself, painted the wraparound porch a crisp navy blue, and planted a line of hydrangeas along the front walkway. Because I was leaving the country for an extended period, I did what any responsible, trusting daughter would do. I left a general power of attorney with my father, Richard. It was supposed to be a safety net. If a pipe burst, if the property taxes got lost in the mail, or if there was an emergency with my neighborhood HOA, my dad had the legal authority to handle it on my behalf. I never, in my wildest nightmares, imagined he would use that piece of paper to steal my home. The day I flew back to Seattle, I was exhausted. I hadn't told my family the exact time of my arrival because I just wanted to sleep for 2 days straight before dealing with the chaos of my younger sister Brittany's upcoming wedding. Brittany was 26, the undisputed golden child of the family, and she was marrying Derek. Derek was the heir to a chain of luxury car dealerships in the Pacific Northwest. His family had money, status, and expectations. My parents, on the other hand, were comfortably middle class, but nowhere near the tax bracket they pretended to be in. I pulled up to my address in an Uber, dreaming of my own bed, but as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, my blood ran cold. There was a silver minivan parked in my driveway, a child's tricycle was discarded on the front lawn, and there, standing on my navy blue porch, was a woman I had never seen before, casually watering my hydrangeas. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked up the driveway, dragging my suitcase behind me. "Excuse me?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Can I help you? What are you doing at my house?" The woman lowered her watering can and gave me a puzzled, polite smile. "Oh, hi. I'm Brenda. And this isn't your house, sweetie. My husband and I bought this place 2 months ago." The world tilted on its axis. I literally felt the blood drain from my face. "That's impossible," I stammered, pulling out my phone. "I own this house. My name is Evelyn. There has to be a mistake." Brenda's smile faded into a look of concern, tinged with suspicion. "Look, I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but we closed on this house in April. We bought it from a man named Richard. He had all the paperwork. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call the police." Richard, my father. I didn't argue with her. I couldn't. I stumbled back to the sidewalk, my vision blurring with tears of pure panic, and pulled up the King County property tax records on my phone. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely type in my own address. When the page finally loaded, the truth hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Owner history. Previous owner, Evelyn Adams. Current owner, Brenda and Thomas Miller. Sale price, 680, 0. Date of transfer, April 14th. My father had sold my house. He had used the power of attorney to legally sign the deed over to strangers. He liquidated my biggest asset, my safe haven, and completely wiped out my equity. And the worst part? I immediately knew exactly where that money had gone. For the past 8 months, my family group chat had been insufferable. Brittany was planning the wedding of the century. She had booked a private estate on San Juan Island. She was flying in a celebrity florist from Los Angeles. Her custom Vera Wang gown cost more than a brand new sedan. Whenever I asked my mother, Susan, how they were affording a $150,000 wedding, she would just vaguely wave me off and say, "Oh, your father made some brilliant investments. We want our little girl to have the day she deserves, so Derek's family knows she's a prize." The brilliant investment was my home. I didn't go to a hotel. I dragged my luggage straight back to a rideshare and gave the driver my parents' address in Bellevue. The 30-minute drive felt like an eternity. I was practically vibrating with rage. I ran through 100 different scenarios in my head, hoping against hope that maybe I was wrong. Maybe my father had put the money in a high-yield trust for me. Maybe there was a massive medical emergency they hid from me? No. I knew my sister. I knew my parents' blind spot for her. I didn't knock. I used my old key and shoved the front door open so hard it slammed against the drywall. Laughter drifted from the kitchen. I walked in to find my mother, Susan, and my sister, Brittany, sitting at the island, surrounded by 3 different tiers of wedding cake and an open bottle of champagne. Brittany was showing my mother a binder full of floral arrangements. "Evelyn!" my mother gasped, dropping her fork. "You're home early! Why didn't you tell us?" "Where's my house, Mom?" I asked, my voice eerily calm despite the hurricane inside me. Brittany rolled her eyes, immediately annoyed that the attention had shifted from her buttercream frosting to me. Hello to you too. Nice to see you after 2 years." "Shut up, Brittany," I snapped, never taking my eyes off my mother. "I went to Ballard. There is a family living in my home. The county records say Dad sold it in April. So I will ask you one more time before I call the cops. Where is my house?" My mother's face went pale, but instead of guilt, I saw defensive indignation. She stood up, smoothing her apron. "Evelyn, please calm down. You're being dramatic. Your father was going to sit you down and explain everything over dinner." "Explain what?" I screamed, finally losing my grip. "That he stole $680,000 from me?" Just then, my father walked into the kitchen from the garage. He froze, assessing the screaming match, and let out a heavy sigh, acting like I was the unreasonable one. "Evelyn, lower your voice. The neighbors will hear," Richard said, stepping forward. "We didn't steal anything. You gave me power of attorney. It was completely legal." "It was for emergencies, Dad, not to liquidate my property." "It was an emergency," Brittany chimed in, crossing her arms defensively. "Derek's parents were threatening to call off the wedding if we couldn't match their financial contributions. They are paying for a 3-week honeymoon in Bora Bora and bought us a house. We had to show them we weren't just some middle-class charity case. You have a high-paying job, Evelyn. You can just buy another house later. I only get married once." I stared at her, utterly disgusted. "You sold my home to buy ice sculptures and a Vera Wang dress?" "We just borrowed the equity, sweetheart," my father tried to soothe, using a patronizing tone that made me want to smash the champagne bottle. "You weren't even living there. You were in London, making a fortune. Brittany needed this to secure her future. Once she's married into Derek's family, she'll be set for life. We'll slowly pay you back over the next 10 years. Family helps family." "10 years?" I laughed, a bitter, hysterical sound. "I want my money right now. All of it." "Well, that's impossible," my mother snapped, dropping the sweet act. "The money is gone, the venue is paid for, the deposits are locked in, and the wedding is in 4 weeks. You are not going to ruin your sister's special day because you're being selfish about an empty house." I looked at the 3 of them. My father, who committed fraud, my mother, who justified it, and my sister, who wore my stolen equity like a crown. In that moment, a switch flipped inside my brain. Screaming wasn't going to get my money back. Crying wasn't going to reverse the deed. If I threw a fit and stormed out, they would just paint me as the jealous, unhinged older sister and go on with their fabulous stolen lives. I needed leverage. I needed them to think they had won, just long enough for me to strike. So, I took a deep breath. I forced my hands to unclench. "Okay," I whispered, faking defeat. Brittany blinked. "Okay?" "I'm furious," I said, keeping my eyes cast downward to hide the pure venom in them. "But I understand why you did it. You should have asked me. But you're right. I have a good job. Just promise me you'll actually pay me back." My parents practically melted with relief. My dad rushed forward to hug me, and it took everything in my power not to flinch. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll draft up a payment plan after the honeymoon. Thank you for being so mature about this." I left their house 30 minutes later, claiming I was going to check into a hotel to sleep off the jet lag. But I didn't go to a hotel. I sat in my rental car and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the voice memo app. I had recorded the entire 30-minute conversation in the kitchen. Every admission of guilt. Every confirmation that they sold my house specifically to fund the wedding, and that they had done it without my knowledge. My next stop was downtown Seattle, to a high-rise building that housed one of the most ruthless civil litigation and fraud attorneys in the state, Mr. Thomas Harrison. When I sat in Thomas's plush leather office and played the recording, a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "Evelyn," Thomas said, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers. "What your father did isn't just a breach of fiduciary duty. It's felony wire fraud, grand theft, and conversion of assets. The power of attorney gave him the right to act in your best interest, not to enrich himself or your sister. I want everything back," I told him coldly. "And I don't want to just sue them. I want to ruin them. I want to take the house they live in. I want the wedding venue to know the funds are stolen. I want it all to burn down." Thomas pulled out a legal pad. "We file a civil suit immediately. We'll place a lis pendens a lien on your parents' own house so they can't sell or borrow against it. We will file for an emergency injunction to freeze your father's bank accounts where the proceeds of your house sale were deposited. But if we move today, they might try to hide the remaining cash." "So when do we move?" I asked. Thomas checked his calendar. "When is the wedding?" 4 weeks from this Saturday." "Perfect," Thomas grinned. "We spend the next 3 weeks building an airtight case, tracking every single wire transfer they made to these wedding vendors. We wait until they are tapped out, until the final non-refundable payments are made, and the entire family is gathered. Then, we drop the hammer." I walked out of that office feeling like a loaded gun. For the next 3 weeks, I played the supportive bridesmaid. I smiled at the bridal showers. I held Brittany's veil during her fittings. I listened to my parents boast to Derek's wealthy parents about how much they were contributing to the big day. They had no idea that I was holding a match, just waiting to toss it into their $150,000 pile of stolen gasoline. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in psychological endurance. I smiled until my jaw ached. I poured mimosas at the bridal shower, meticulously adjusting the sash on Brittany's chair, all while knowing that the very chair she sat on was paid for by the stolen equity of my home. Behind the scenes, however, my attorney, Thomas Harrison, was executing a legal blitzkrieg. Armed with the audio recording of my parents confessing to the theft, Thomas hired a forensic accountant. What they uncovered made the $150,000 wedding look like a drop in the bucket. My father hadn't just sold my house in Ballard for $680,000. He had immediately wired $200,000 of it to pay off his and my mother's underwater mortgage on their Bellevue home. He then dropped $65,000 in cash on a brand new Mercedes-Benz GLE for Brittany as an early wedding present. The rest of the money was bleeding out in daily increments to caterers, florists, event planners, and high-end boutique stores. They were treating my life savings like a limitless lottery jackpot, desperate to match the sheer wealth of Derek's family. "We have exactly what we need," Thomas told me on a Tuesday, 4 days before the wedding. We were sitting in his office, reviewing the thick stack of bank subpoenas. "I've filed the civil suit for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion. The judge listened to your audio recording and immediately granted an ex parte emergency injunction. As of tomorrow morning, every single bank account tied to your father's social security number will be frozen. He won't be able to buy a cup of coffee, let alone write the final checks for the wedding venue." "And the criminal side?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm. "I forwarded the file to the King County Prosecutor's Economic Crimes Unit," Thomas said, his eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction. "Misusing a power of attorney to liquidate real estate for personal gain is a Class B felony in Washington state. They are preparing an arrest warrant for Richard, but the civil process servers are ready to move first. When do you want to serve them?" I looked at the calendar on his desk. The wedding was on Saturday, but Friday night was the rehearsal dinner, an outrageously opulent 70-person event hosted by Derek's parents at the Bellevue Club. The entire wedding party, the extended families, and Derek's father's affluent business partners would all be in attendance. "Friday," I said coldly, right in the middle of the toasts. Friday evening arrived, dripping with Pacific Northwest luxury. The private dining room at the Bellevue Club was adorned with crystal chandeliers and cascading arrangements of white orchids. Derek's family, the affluent car dealership magnates, sat at the head table. Derek's father, Arthur, was a stern, intimidating man who valued reputation and social standing above all else. His mother, Beatrice, was dripping in heirloom diamonds, looking down her nose at my parents, who were desperately trying to play the part of wealthy equals. I sat at the bridal table, sipping sparkling water, watching my father clink his glass and laugh heartily with Arthur. My father was wearing a custom tuxedo, undoubtedly paid for by my Ballard house. Brittany was glowing in a silk rehearsal gown, clinging to Derek's arm as if she had already won the game of life. At 8:15 p.m., just as the waiters began clearing the filet mignon plates, my father stood up and tapped his champagne flute with a silver spoon. The room grew quiet. "I'd like to say a few words," Richard announced, beaming at the crowd. When my beautiful daughter Brittany told us she was marrying Derek, Susan and I knew we had to give her a wedding fit for royalty. We spared no expense, because family is everything to us. And to Arthur and Beatrice, we just want to say thank you for welcoming our girl into your incredible family. Applause rippled through the room. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Brittany blew a kiss to our dad. I checked my watch. 8:17 p.m. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the dining room swung open. The maitre d' tried to step in front of them, but two men in nondescript business suits brushed right past him. They marched with singular, terrifying purpose directly toward the head table. The room fell into a confused hush. My father, still holding his champagne glass, frowned. "Excuse me, gentlemen, this is a private event." The taller of the two men didn't blink. "Richard Adams?" "Yes?" my father answered, puffing out his chest indignantly. "Who is asking?" "You have been served," the man said, slapping a massive, 3-inch thick manila envelope onto the table, right over my father's dessert plate. The second man stepped toward my mother. "Susan Adams, you have been served." He dropped an identical envelope in front of her. Then, he turned to the bride. "Brittany Adams, you have been served." Brittany gasped, recoiling as if the envelope was covered in toxic sludge. "What is this? Who let you in here?" The two men didn't say another word. Having completed their legal duty, they turned on their heels and walked out of the silent, stunned dining room. Arthur, Derek's father, slammed his hand on the table. "Richard, what on earth is going on here? Who were those men?" My father's face had drained of all color. He stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. With trembling hands, he tore the flap open and pulled out the legal documents. The bold, black lettering at the top of the page was visible from where I sat. In the Superior Court of the State of Washington. Evelyn Adams, plaintiff, v. Richard Adams, Susan Adams, and Brittany Adams, defendants. Complaint for felony fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion. Notice of emergency asset freeze. My father dropped the papers. He looked like he was going to vomit. "Dad?" Brittany squeaked, her voice high and panicked. "Dad, what does it say?" I stood up slowly, picking up my clutch. The scrape of my chair echoed loudly in the dead silent room. All eyes snapped to me. "I can save you the reading time, Arthur," I said, my voice echoing clearly across the dining room. I didn't look at my parents. I looked directly at Derek and his family. My father is being sued. He's also under criminal investigation by the King County Prosecutor's Office. Arthur stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Criminal investigation? For what?" "For grand theft and wire fraud," I replied smoothly. "While I was working in London, my father used a contingency power of attorney to illegally sell my home. He stole $680,000 from me, and he used that stolen money to pay for this wedding, the florist, the venue, and the Mercedes SUV currently parked in valet." Chaos erupted. It didn't start with a bang, but with a collective gasp of horror from 70 high society guests. "That's a lie!" my mother shrieked, jumping to her feet. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She's insane! Evelyn has always been jealous of Brittany. She's making this up to ruin the wedding." "Am I, Mom?" I asked, pulling my phone from my purse. "Because as of 9 a.m. this morning, there is a legal lien placed on your house in Bellevue, and as of noon, the judge froze every bank account in Dad's name. You have $0 to your name. The final payments to the caterer, the venue, and the honeymoon resort are going to bounce on Monday." Derek, who had been sitting frozen beside Brittany, slowly turned to look at his bride. "Brittany, is this true? Did your parents steal her house to pay for this?" Brittany burst into hysterical, hyperventilating tears. "Derek, no, it wasn't like that. Dad just borrowed the equity. Evelyn wasn't even using the house. We had to look good for your parents." It was the worst possible thing she could have said. She admitted, right in front of Derek and his ultra-wealthy, reputation-obsessed parents, that she knew about the theft. She admitted that the entire facade of her wealth was a criminal scam built on my stolen property. Arthur's face contorted in sheer disgust. He looked at my father as if Richard were a cockroach that had scurried across his plate. "You fraudulent, pathetic con artist," Arthur spat, his voice deadly low. "Arthur, please, let me explain," my father begged, sweat pouring down his forehead. "It was an advance. We were going to pay her back." "You dragged my family's name into a criminal felony investigation," Arthur roared. He turned to his wife, who was clutching her pearls, utterly aghast. "Beatrice, gather our guests. We are leaving." Derek stood up, peeling Brittany's hands off his tuxedo jacket. "Derek, please. We love each other," Brittany sobbed, falling to her knees on the monogrammed carpet. "The wedding is tomorrow. Everything is paid for." "Nothing is paid for, Brittany," Derek said, his voice completely hollow. He looked at her not with anger but with absolute repulsion. "You let me believe your family was successful. You let me drive a car you knew was bought with stolen money. You're a thief, just like your father. The wedding is off." "No! No, Derek, wait!" Brittany screamed as Derek turned his back on her and walked out of the room, following his parents. Within 5 minutes, the dining room emptied out. Derek's entire family, their friends, and their business associates fled the venue as if the room had caught fire. The only people left were my sobbing sister on the floor, my mother who was staring blankly at the wall in shock, my father who was clutching his chest in a panic attack, and me. I walked over to the head table, looked down at the $680,000 legal nightmare I had just unleashed upon them, and felt nothing but profound peace. "I told you," I whispered to my father, who wouldn't even meet my eyes. "I wanted it all." I turned and walked out of the Bellevue Club, leaving them to the ashes of the fake empire they had built on my back. The fallout was swift and merciless. Saturday, the day of the wedding of the century, was an absolute ghost town. Not a single guest showed up to the San Juan Island estate. The celebrity florist packed up her trucks and left when the final wire transfer from my father's frozen account failed to clear. The venue threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract, only to realize my parents had absolutely nothing left to take. Derek didn't just cancel the wedding. He blocked Brittany on every platform and moved to his family's property in Scottsdale to escape the humiliation. The Pacific Northwest high society circles are small, and gossip spreads like wildfire. The Addams family became an instant pariah. 2 weeks later, the criminal hammer dropped. My father was arrested at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. He was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree wire fraud and 1 count of criminal conversion. Because he had moved the funds across state lines to pay off certain out-of-state wedding vendors, the FBI actually got involved. Richard was looking at 3 to 5 years in federal prison. The civil suit I filed with Thomas Harrison completely dismantled what was left of my parents' lives. They were forced to sell their Bellevue home, the one they had illegally paid off using my money, at a massive loss just to cover their own legal defense fees and to pay the initial judgment the court awarded me. Brittany's brand new Mercedes was repossessed and liquidated by court order, the proceeds going directly back into my account. She went from planning a $150,000 wedding and preparing to live in a luxury mansion to moving into a cramped, one-bedroom apartment in a bad part of Tacoma. Without Derek's money or our parents' stolen funds, she was forced to get a job as a receptionist at a dental office just to pay her rent. As for me, I got back about $550,000 of the original $680,000 they stole between the forced sale of their assets, seizing their retirement accounts, and liquidating the car. It wasn't every penny, but it was enough. I used the money to buy a beautiful new penthouse condo in downtown Seattle, far away from the suburbs and the memories of the family that betrayed me. I haven't spoken to my parents or my sister since the night of the rehearsal dinner. From what I hear through distant relatives, my father is currently serving a 4-year sentence in a minimum security federal facility, and my mother is living in a trailer park, blaming everyone but herself for her downfall. They sold my sanctuary to buy a fairy tale. In the end, all I did was wake them up. And that is exactly how you turn a stolen house into a masterclass in revenge. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones most willing to bleed you dry. But Evelyn proved that a paper trail and a ruthless lawyer are the ultimate equalizers. Hit that like button if you think the father deserves his federal prison sentence, and share this video with a friend to remind them to never give out a power of attorney. Subscribe for more real-life drama.